Snetterton here today for a track day. Now, I don't normally give myself the luxury of doing a track day, but it's been about 2 months, the middle of August, since I last did my race, and we're here in the middle of October and I haven't driven the car since. So I'm very much looking forward to today. As I've mentioned before, Snetterton isn't my favourite track. I haven't really had many sort of favourable visits here. I guess a lot of the time I've been here, it's been in slow cars. And at the start of the year or the middle of the year when we were here with Christian, it wasn't, I guess, the most fun, just because we didn't have anyone to race against and it was just sort of driving around by myself. So I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm hoping to sort of be there in the tin top pack and hopefully not be towards the back. I think most of this year, in the tin tops at least, we've sort of been mid-pack, which is good. I've really enjoyed sort of having those battles. I guess you could say the ones most notably like Callum Perfect. We've had some good battles with him, and numerous other drivers through different races. We've had some good battles with Gideon. Well, I say Gideon, he's normally been up the road for me a little bit, so yeah, him. Rick Skelsey, he's going to be here this weekend, who we were sharing with last time out with our DNF at Brandt. He'll be out this weekend, but in a BMW in the top class of tin tops. So yeah, it should be really exciting. Obviously it's a long track, so we're only going to probably get in our 15-minute race, I'd say maybe 8 laps, maybe 8 laps, 7 or 8 laps. Well, I did the KA last year, I think we only did 6 laps, so yeah, hopefully we could do a few more than that. But yeah, so today we've got testing. Sorry, it's not testing, it's a track day, so just road cars. Anyone can be out there in their cars. So yeah, of course, track day rules mean you're probably never really going to get a very good lap, but regardless, I'm going to go out there, just learn the car a bit. We're going to start off on the Nankang NS2R tyres, which are sort of the slower tyres. We've got, I guess, our backup tyres for racing. Back here you can see we've got our rain tyre, which are the Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, I think. So we've got those if it starts raining. It's obviously been raining a bit this morning. It's sort of cleared up now, but the track is still pretty wet. So yeah, we're going to get out there. We're going to go and try our best to do some adequate laps, and then hopefully in the second part of the day we'll put on the Nankang AR1 tyres and hopefully do a bit better. Let's see. So a few days before our race day, wanted to get some testing in the car, some laps in the car, because this is the first time it'd been out on track since the puncture, since the damage. So we wanted to see what it was going to be like, and also I wanted to get my bearings once more, because it had been over 2 months since I'd last been in the car. So I really wanted to get some laps in there and just make sure that I was where I wanted to be before the race weekend. As mentioned, Snetterton isn't exactly my favourite track, so it was always going to be a tricky one this weekend, even though my car theoretically should be okay around here because of the top end maybe advantage over the Fiestas in my class. I was also a bit worried because I just never gelled with this track and I always really struggled around it, so I wanted to have this track day, get some laps in, understand where I might be at come race day with the CMMCS. But I've got to be honest, I wasn't really too confident for the weekend. I was fully not expecting to be up the front of the tin tops, of course, never really am, but I wasn't really expecting to go for the class wins as well. Of course, I want to go for the class wins for my championship position, and at this point, after the DNF and missing some rounds and the failures, we were actually quite far behind Ian, who was leading at this point. I didn't know this at the time, but from retrospective, I can tell you we were a little bit behind Ian at this point, so I needed to really get the performances in as Ian was leading the TP class championship. So I really wanted to, of course, go for that, but realising at this stage it was going to be hard. I basically needed to win everything to make that possible. So we're now at the race day, we're now at qualifying. We'd had a few laps at Snetterton a few days prior. It wasn't that many laps, to be perfectly honest. We just went out there, got to grips with the car once more, and just didn't want to put too much stress on the car, so it wasn't a huge amount of laps out there. Snetterton's a long track anyway, so it's always hard to get a big amount of laps in, but regardless, it was just a few laps to get me acquainted with the car before we went for this qualifying session at the start of the race day in October. So I'm just going to show you my best lap, which still was not ideal, which we'll get to at the end of the lap, but decided to go for a lap at the end of the session, give myself a gap. You can see I've got quite a significant gap to the car in front, which is a Honda Civic, same car as mine, but with more horsepower, about 30 or 40 more horsepower. As I thought this sort of gap would be fine, even if the driver in front had a mistake or whatever. So
not too bad through the first few corners, keeping it relatively safe. I didn't want to throw it off in qualifying. At the end of the day, there's not too many people in my class, so of course I wanted to finish. That was the main thing, at least take that championship down to the final round of the season at Brands Hatch in just over a month after this event here. So in the first few corners, you can see we're already caught up with Gideon really in the Civic in front, so I wasn't sure whether he was on a back-off lap or whether he was actually going for it here. So I was trying to gauge where I could possibly get past him, but the thing is, he does have a lot of horsepower in that Civic, as mentioned, so messing up this corner here, Agostini in the middle of the lap, or the first, I guess, third of the lap here, completely missing the apex there, which doesn't help, but you can see my delta in the bottom right, the race logic that we have been borrowing, and I've got to say, a fantastic bit of kit. When my gloves aren't covering it, you can see actually we are up on our fastest lap. It hadn't been a very good qualifying session up until this point. We'd missed a lot of good laps. We kept running into either other cars in front of us on our laps or getting overtaken by other cars, so I struggled a lot in this qualifying session, and it was basically this lap or nothing. I think this was my last lap of the session, so needed to make sure this was a good one, and you can see the Civic in front blasting away in a straight line, and I'm 2 seconds of my delta, so at this point I thought, okay, I'm actually not doing too badly here. It's still not going to be a great lap, but it might be something that could hopefully put me towards the top of our class. That was, I guess, the main thing for me at the end of the day, but we're catching up to Gideon here, and at the end of the straight he seems to have braked quite early, so are we going to have to get past him through the Bommel? No, not really. We're not close enough through there, but then through Coram, the last few corners here, I was looking to the inside, but you can see I'm having to lift off quite a lot. Gideon's sort of in the middle of the road. At this point, in hindsight, I should have gone round the outside of him and then down the inside into the last corner. But my thought was, I don't want to ruin both of our laps here. It's not like a crazy high-level championship or whatever, so qualifying doesn't really matter, but in hindsight, I should have just gone for it there because he was quite slow through that last corner, and unfortunately for me, it really sort of did hinder my lap time. Even though it was a good lap, it was not good enough, unfortunately. We actually had a pretty mediocre qualifying lap, unfortunately, there, which was frustrating in reflection because I feel like we had a decent chance of being class pole, but even after all we had done, I wasn't on class pole, which I guess was a bit frustrating after doing the track day. I thought that was going to give me a little bit of an advantage. I never normally do a track day at all, really. I think the last one I did was in 2021 sometime, so I thought hopefully this would be a good opportunity for me to be somewhat competitive, but unfortunately for me that was not the case, and you can see we're pulling into the pit lane. I didn't know at the time, but of course an unfortunate result for me. It wasn't the end of the world, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't on class pole, which I guess I'd kind of hoped for at this point. But actually, we have to say, even though I was disappointed, it was a great qualifying lap from James, the son of Ian, who is leading the championship right now. Ian has done all of the rounds. James has missed, I think, the first sort of 3 or 4 rounds of the season, so he's unfortunately not really in the championship battle unless he had won everything. But he did a great job here. He took pole position within our class, just ahead of me on the grid, so we'll be starting side by side. And even though I was disappointed, having got to know Ian and James really well this year, you know, I was really happy for him because it's not an easy track to get a pole position in his car because his car isn't the quickest in the straight line. So massive fair play to James. He did a great job in qualifying, but you know, the competitor in me was like, yes, he beat me in qualifying, but I don't want to let him beat me in the race. So as I normally do, it's not, as I mentioned, a crazy high level championship, so I could have obviously blasted up behind this Sierra in front of me here, but I didn't want to jump James at the start. He got the pole position legitimately, so I didn't want to overtake him before the line. It's a little thing, but just because we're not really in one of these sort of championships that's really high level or whatever, it's more about a community based environment. I didn't want to go for that sort of lunge off the start where I guess I could have got ahead technically, but I wanted to keep it fair for the race start, of course. So in the opening corners, even though these cars in front have a lot more power than us, they're going to be on cold tyres too, especially the Sierra in front of us, which is on slick tyres. They're going to be quite slow in these opening corners, so I was wary of that. I tried to go on the outside of James, but didn't really get enough speed around the outside to get past him. It's going to have to settle in behind him here in the opening stages. I'm also way too cautious in these opening stages. I always am. It's something I really do need to sort of focus on and get better at, but my ability to go quick on cold tyres isn't there right now. And you can see I'm even coming under attack from Angelo in his Citroen Saxo. I had to pull to the inside as Rod Burley, the pole sitter, pulled off with I think a cracked wheel rim, and also I think he cracked his caliper as well. So not a great start for Rod. And this is a replay of the start, so you can see Rod was leading, but you can see at this point he pulls to the left-hand side of the track, and he actually pulls over to retire from the race. So you can see some really quick cars in this one, and we're of course towards the back with our car, but I'm behind James, just ahead of Angelo, ahead of a few other cars as well. But as the race would go on, we should be able to overtake some of the cars in front, as I think we do a bit of speed in front of them. So in front, James goes for a big slide through the bomb hole, and at that point I had to just back off and just give him a few meters, because I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen there. He's had a few moments this year and he's always managed to hold on to them, so I guess I wasn't worried about him spinning into the middle of the track and, you know, hitting me or whatever, but I just wanted to make sure he recovered it properly, because it's a long race. Well, I suppose it's not a long race, but it's a long lap, so I can hopefully get past him at some point. So at this point I saw in my mirrors Gideon. He was going for the overtake on me, so I want to give him that line to try and get past both of us, and he easily got past. But I hoped that would put James off so I could dive to the inside here, but I wasn't quite late enough on the brakes there to put my nose down the inside and get past James. So you can still see being quite tentative in these early stages. I don't want to be too crazy in the opening few laps here whilst these tyres aren't fully up to temperature. And you can see the cars in front aren't pulling away massively, so I think we should be able to catch up to, I guess my main goal at this point was trying to catch up to Dominic Ryan in the red Fiesta, because I thought that we might be able to keep up with him. He's got a similar amount of horsepower to us, and also he's a bit lighter as well, so it was a relatively fair fight, I think, between me and Dominic Ryan, but he's quite far up the road at this point. So I was trying to go on the outside of James at Coram. You can see I'm on the dirty part of the track, so I'm a little bit tentative. I'm down the inside, but no, James brakes too late and gets me around the outside there, so a nice little squabble. I was a bit annoyed that I didn't manage to get that one sorted, but a little bit later on in the race we're putting the speed to good use. As I mentioned, I've got a bit more top end speed than James at the end of the straight especially, so I'm using that to good use. I had a better run out of the final corner too, threw it to the inside and got the overtake done, which is good. So now I'm into the class lead, and with James behind me and Ian behind him, I was in a good place to maybe recoup some of the position I'd lost in the championship after missing a few rounds and retiring. So that's on board with Liam Pauling. He's in that blue Saxo that I raced my first ever complete motor race. So he was leading his class, and unfortunately for him, he had a bit of a spin down at turn 2, and he came onto the track just in front of us. Gideon squeezes through, but I don't manage to squeeze through. I'm not quite close enough to Gideon, and for whatever reason it puts me off through here. Even though I hit the apex through here, I'm taking decent speed. I have a really slow exit to this corner here. Something I was struggling with in this whole race, this whole event, was gearing, and James squeezes to the inside here and gets the overtake done. A nice view actually, watching back from Liam's point of view. You had to show him the reason why he was with us in the first place, because he was quite a lot quicker in qualifying. But you can see on board once more, you can see James is looking to the inside. I start to move to the left hand side, but I realise there's nothing I can do. I thought my top end speed would be helpful here, but James is quicker through there. As mentioned, my gear ratios just weren't quite there for this track. I was struggling out of the slower speed corners, so turn 2, Agostini also I was struggling at, and also the last corner as well. I'd have to go into third gear because second was too low and I'd rev it up quite a lot. Anyway, enough excuses here. I was behind James and I was trying my best to get back past him here. So into the bomb hole, I had a better run out of there, and you can see I looked to the inside. It didn't quite work out for me there. I didn't have enough I guess bravery to throw it down the inside and get past him there, so that's unfortunate. But round Coram once more, I knew I was slightly quicker around Coram. You can see I'm closing as we go through here, but I didn't want to go for the move down the inside into the last corner because I thought that was going to compromise me down the straight. So I got a pretty similar run to James out the last corner. As I mentioned, third gear through there wasn't ideal, but by the time we get to the start-finish line, we're pretty much the same speed, and then as we go past the start-finish line, my top-end speed does come into fruition, and I get to the inside, go to the inside of the track to make sure he doesn't get back past me on the brakes, and that's the overtake complete. In front of me, we also got a nice little battle between Gideon and Liam, and I'm starting to close in on them as well. And James, at this point, I managed to get past, I managed to gap him a little bit, but there was one last thing to throw it up here in the last few laps of this race. There was one last situation we had to deal with. I was worried that quite possibly I'd lose this position to James again, because battling in front between Liam and Gideon would end up causing me to have to take some avoiding action. And we'll see that in a few corners time, but Liam gets a great run out of the last corner, tries to get alongside Gideon, but Gideon's top end speed is pretty impressive. He manages to pull clear of Liam by the end of the straight here, but Liam will definitely be a little bit more committed through the first corner there, even though I think he has to be a little bit cautious about what Gideon is doing here, because he wasn't sure which way Gideon was going, left or right, so he was sort of having to wait for Gideon to make that move before he could decide what to do, because of course Liam in the Saxo just does not have as much speed in the top end as Gideon does. But through the corners, I guess theoretically Liam will be quicker anyway, and he's an incredibly quick driver, so he's always going to be quick through the corners whatever car he's in. But I think he pressures Gideon into a bit of a mistake here. He goes wide across the grass. I have to take some avoiding action because I wasn't sure where Gideon was going to come back onto the track. We can see this is from Liam's point of view once more. Really cool camera shot and some great noise actually. James throws it to the inside of Gideon here around Agostini, but Gideon has an ace up his sleeve, which is the top end speed of his Honda, so he goes back down the inside of James and he gets the position on him. Now, this was very important for me because at this point Gideon and James would start battling, which really helped me pull a gap to the both of them. So I was able to focus on the race in front of me, which was Liam, and to be fair to him, at this point I was like, I'm in my class lead, he's chasing down his class lead, I didn't want anything too silly here, so I was in a position where I didn't need to go for this overtake here. I would go for it if it sort of opened up for me, but I didn't want to force it and make Liam have an incident or whatever. So at this point I was like, I'm going to just stick behind him unless he makes a mistake or whatever, and then I'll try and get through. But at this point, even though I definitely have the quicker car, but Liam's just a much better driver, he was managing to keep in front, of course. So at this point I was like, I'm going to stick behind him. I tried to signal that intent by pulling to the left hand side of the track here. So of course he realises my car is quicker in the top end. But at this point I was like, I'm trying to stick to the left hand side here to try and show that I'm not going to go for the overtake. But I guess it's just one of those things. Sometimes you have no idea what the driver behind is going to be doing, and whether they're just doing that to fake you out. But you can see how quick Liam is through the corners here. Of course that car is a bit lighter, but he's just got incredible commitment in that car. And I know from myself driving that Saxo, it is very tricky to drive. And over the coming few laps I decided I'm just going to back off here. I'm going to let Liam go for his charge, and he didn't quite manage to get it. Unfortunately for him, he would be side by side across the line with Dominic Ryan for his class lead, but he wasn't able to get that one done. For me, I managed to take my class win. I was the last car on the lead lap as well, so I'd put enough of a gap between myself and James and Gideon that they were a lap down and I wasn't, so it wasn't much, but we just about managed to make that stick, which was good. So that was a big thing. I was relieved. I was very disappointed after qualifying. I was very frustrated, to be perfectly honest, and I was like, this is probably one of the worst moments of the season. Obviously being a bit dramatic, but I realised I've got it in me to go for the class win, so just focus on that, get a decent enough start, and then hopefully we can make it work. And to be fair, the race wasn't perfect. We had a great battle with James though, and we looked to race 2, we'd have Gideon in between us once more. So I was thinking, hopefully in the second race, it's done on the result of the first one, I can get a good enough start that I can hopefully be ahead of James, we won't have a squabble, and for me at least, I managed to pull away and get a class win. That was what was in the back of my mind, but it's never going to be that easy. James is very, very competitive. We've got Ian there as well as Angelo, we've mentioned them both before as well. Nobody's going to be out this race, and obviously people will go into the second race after reviewing footage and ideas from the first one and know what they want to do for the second one, so they'll be in a definite position, a better position to go for a good result. So you can see we're exiting the assembly area to go for this last race of the day at Snetterton. I think we were the penultimate race of the day. I don't think we were the last one, but the sun was definitely starting to set in October at this time of year. I mean, it's only like 4 PM I think. We're going for the last race, or the penultimate race of the day, and the sun is starting to set. You can see it's a lot darker, and in general, we're not going to really need that tinted visor unless we're racing straight into the sun. Now, a big thing for me in this last race of the day was if the situation arose, I wanted to beat my best lap from the first race. It's pretty standard stuff, but I wanted to try and make sure I did that because I knew there was much more in this car than I was able to give it in that first race. So that was a big thing for me to try and beat that best lap. As mentioned many times, the race logic, the touch that we've been using for, I guess, the second part of the season, a fantastic bit of kit I couldn't recommend more. I was given the product to test it out, and they've been kind enough to let me keep it, and it's a great bit of kit, and I really am impressed with it, to be perfectly honest. So we'll be using that to the best of our abilities to try and see where we can go faster in this second race of the day. So rolling start, didn't get the best rolling start. That's just words you'll hear many a times on this channel. Gideon flies past before the start finish line, but we tuck in behind him. I knew this was a tough situation for me here because I thought I was quicker than Gideon in that first race. I was a lot quicker in the first race, to be perfectly honest, and you can see under yellow flags here we got overtaken by Subaru. So at the time I was a bit frustrated. I was like, what is he doing? Clear yellow flags, the car off on the side of the track, and he's just going for the overtake. Whatever, he was trying to go for the race win, but still, I don't know, a little bit annoyed about that. Don't feel like that was totally on or needed. But regardless, we continue on, and after the pretty bad start and having to avoid cars around us, flying up the inside, flying up the outside, and some quick cars that retired in that first race managing to get past us, of course, we try to settle into a rhythm here behind Gideon, behind Adrian, and try to settle in and get some decent lap times here. And you can see just behind me that actually, I guess good for my class at least, it's been a great start for Rick Scalzi in the BMW. He's managed to get ahead of James, and that's allowed to be a car between us. So hopefully in my head I was thinking, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to try and pull away now, as hopefully they'll have a bit of a squabble out there and I'll manage to pull a gap on them. But you can see in these opening stages, because cars on different tyres, some are warm, some are not very warm, and it meant that some people were very cautious around some of the corners, and even though they'd be very quick in the straight line, they'd just really struggle through the corners because they didn't think the tyres were up to temperature. So down the straight, you can see in front of me it's 3 wide between Gideon, Liam, and I think Adrian Matthews, and then also we have a Sierra pulling off to the sides here. I'm not sure whether he's retiring or what. He's going quite slowly here. To be fair to him, he's sticking to that left-hand side of the track. He's given up every position very fairly there, giving us a lot of room to deal with. And at this point I was like, okay, that's done. I think the craziness of the start is done, so hopefully now the battle will be between the 3 of us in front here. Of course, I wanted to beat Gideon. We're in a similar car, yes, but he's on wider tyres, and also he's got a lot more power, so I was thinking, if I can beat him, that would be good for my morale, at least. And to be honest, in these opening laps, it didn't look like it was going to be the case. Gideon was able to pull away, as with Liam in front. They were sort of following the Volvo in the early stages, and then they were able to catch up to the back of Dominic Ryan. As mentioned in the first race, he was kind of my goal to get past, because I thought we've got a very similar amount of power. He's a little bit lighter, but I guess power to weight, I think we're about the same, so it was a really good squabble between us in terms of the cars are pretty much the same, so I guess it's mostly down to the driver. So Gideon had a pretty bad run through the last corner there, and I had to sort of try and get past him, but he's just got too much power, unfortunately, so I couldn't get him down the straight. So next thing, can I get him in the braking zone down into turn 2? Wasn't really close enough here and wasn't really brave enough. So a few battles went on in front. Gideon managed to get past Dominic Ryan, and so it was my turn to try and get past him as well. You can see Gideon's actually gone up the road a bit there. He was locking up quite a bit into the last corner, but it wasn't really stopping him from putting in some better lap times, and you can see he's closing in on Liam and trying to get past there. So now Dominic Ryan going defensive into the last corner a little bit. Well, maybe that's his racing line, to be fair. I haven't really been racing with him around this track. He's been ahead of me, quite way ahead of me up until this point. So this is my first point in this whole weekend where we're actually behind him and trying to go for an overtake. So you can see the slipstream really helping me out here. As mentioned, we got a very similar amount of horsepower. I had a better run out of the last corner. I managed to get that move done down the inside, but my immediate tension would look to my mirrors because I knew that he was likely going to go for an overtake back on me. So I would defend the inside, and then down at Agostini, he sort of half looked down the inside, and to be fair, that put me off a little bit. I missed my braking point and took a slightly wider line through the corner, but luckily I had enough momentum around that wider part of the corner to get ahead of him here. So that enabled me to get past. I managed to start putting a bit of a lead on him, not a significant amount, but a little bit. And you can see in front of me, we're actually now chasing down Liam because Gideon has got in front of him. Gideon was a bit inconsistent throughout this race. Through sun laps he would be very, very quick, and of course he was able to get past Liam, but then the latter stage of the race I think Liam started to catch back up to him, and maybe that put the pressure on Gideon, so he would start, I guess, messing up a little bit, making a few more mistakes. As mentioned, he was locking up quite a bit into the last corner, so I guess that was definitely a possibility for Liam to get past if he could get side by side through Coram. So I wasn't doing too badly here. You can see on my delta when my gloves moved on the right hand side of the screen, I was up. I was actually doing, this is better than my first race lap time as well, so it saved my lap time from the first race and told me in the second race whether I was going quicker or not. So I think there was quite a big headwind down part of the track, which was really quite frustrating because it was really losing me a lot of time. But then I guess on reflection I realised that meant I had a tailwind down the other part, because of course the straights go in opposite directions. So I guess really it should balance itself out, as the main straight and the back straight are a similar distance. I mean, I have no idea off the top of my head, but they feel like a similar-ish distance, even though you're probably taking more speed through this part here. So I can't actually remember where the headwind and the tailwind was. I think this is where we were encountering the headwind. Yeah, you can see the timer on the right hand side of the screen is going red. You see the red light. So I was getting a headwind down the back straight and a good tailwind down the main straight. So I was hoping it would balance itself out enough that I could try and beat my first lap time, or my best lap time from the first race of the day. And I'm starting to catch up to the two guys in front here. We've, I guess, quite a big gap to the cars in front. So it was really just a battle between us lot. And there's actually quite a lot of good live stream footage from the first race of the day over on the BRSCC's YouTube channel. Also the CMMCS YouTube channel has re-uploaded it as well. But unfortunately I can't put that in this channel because they don't like it. So unfortunately that's the case, but regardless, it's over on the CMMCS channel if you want to go and watch it, the full live stream. Really good battle with me and James in the first race. Quite a lot of it was caught on the live stream, which was really cool. So here you can see on the timer on the right hand side, we managed to beat our best lap time. It wasn't by a huge amount, but we managed to do it. And you can see I'm signalling to Liam here, go and get Gideon, or try and get Gideon. Gideon's obviously got the advantage in the straight line, and I was like, Liam, just go for him, don't worry about me, I'm not going to overtake you, just go for him. But I guess it's hard to tell whether Liam was even looking, so I backed off a little bit here in the last part of the race. The last lap I just lifted off a few car lengths, not quite as crazy as the first race where I was just way too far behind at the end. But Liam, even though he got a really good exit out of the last corner, wasn't able to get Gideon because of that top end speed. There's the checkered flag. For me, it's a class win. Liam also got his class win as well, so I guess a good end today for both of us here, and thoroughly enjoyable race. Well, Snetterton, as I mentioned, it's a tricky track for me. I've never really got to gel with it perfectly, but much better than I expected at the start of the day after qualifying went pretty badly. So happy with the end of the day. I guess just disappointed I didn't make the most out of qualifying. Just giving Liam a little flash of the mirrors, not the mirrors, the lights there to say well done to him. We both won our class, and I'm not sure who was behind. I think Dominic Ryan was behind us, and then there was quite a big gap between us and then the next group, which was Rick Scalzi battling with James. So we had done a good job in our race here. None of us have got lapped this time. I don't think anyone in the second race got lapped. Maybe the very, very back cars, but I don't think anyone within our class did. So good stuff, really enjoyed it. It wasn't, I guess, the perfect day, but considering how much my relationship with Snetterton is love-hate, I've got to say it was a good day. So just waving to the marshals, a big thanks to all of them, big thanks to everyone that turned up to Snetterton. I mean, I know they're not there for me, but it was a cold and not great day, so it was great to see actually a fair amount of spectators out there. And big thanks to all of them. Manny also, UK Motorsport over on Instagram, he took some nice pictures which you can go and see on his Instagram page. But now time for a reflection of this race event a few days after we got home. Right, so it's a few days after now, a chance to think about Snetterton again, wrap it up, and put it all into a closing monologue for this video. So I was pretty disappointed after qualifying because I'd sort of built up a bit of pressure on myself after the track day a few days before, even though I didn't do a huge amount of laps, it was probably only about sort of 20 competitive laps. In motorsport, that's a lot, so you've got to try and benefit from that. And I was going to quali, I guess, confident-ish that I knew the track and I thought I'd be okay, but without rattling off a whole list of excuses, it just didn't all go together in quali, and I didn't put the lap together when I needed to put it together, so that was a shame. But at the same time, I've got to be honest and say that James did a really good job in his car, in his Fiesta, because that car isn't particularly quick in a straight line, at least the end of the straights. I think we're pretty similar for the first sort of couple hundred meters, but especially because Snetton's got long straights, by the end sort of 100 meters going to turn one and going under the bridge at the back straight, I was able to sort of catch him. Actually, I was quite happy for him to get pole. I mean, obviously you always want to be first in your class, but seeing what he was able to do in that car was really good to see. The progression from James throughout the season has been pretty awesome. So obviously I want to be on pole, but at the same time it's always nice to see someone progressing so quickly and doing really well. So yeah, he did a fantastic job there. I was obviously kicking myself a little bit because I wanted to be up the road a little bit, but I didn't give myself the gap on the lap. So, you know, I saw I was closing in on that Civic in front, and I just wasn't giving myself enough of a gap to make sure that I was quick throughout. So the only person to blame is myself there. The car was definitely capable of going as quick as it did in the race for sure. So yeah, the first race, that was chaotic, but in a good way. I really enjoyed it. So off the start, pretty simple. I mean, we were all sort of quite close in the rolling lap. As always, the fast cars blast off, and there are gaps. By the end of the pack, there's definitely some gaps, but that's fine. That's just motorsport with rolling starts. It sometimes goes that way. But yeah, so James obviously led. I didn't want to overtake him before the line because we were starting side by side, and technically I could have probably got past him because I was in the left-hand lane, which was pulling ahead, but I didn't sort of feel right. I never like to do that when I'm racing with someone. It's like if they qualified ahead, I want to make sure they get to the line first at least, and then obviously go about my way to try and overtake him. So I tried to get around the outside of turn 2. That was never really going to happen because it was all bottling it up in front, like it was all closing up, so I couldn't really get it. And the big thing I was struggling with around Snetterton was third gear. So there are a couple of sort of tighter corners. The last corner's one, the Agostini sort of hairpin, that's one, and also turn 2. Sort of the 3 slower corners, I think the 3 slowest corners on the track, I was struggling with them because third gear was too high, second gear was too low. So I did try to shift down to second a few times, and then I just like immediately would have to shift it back up to third. So my gear ratios weren't right for Snetterton, at least in that middle part. So that's just part of the thing, club racing. I mean, I'm not going to go out my way and change gears for each event. It's like I just want to race, and my car will just sit on my driveway between events, and I'm not going to do a huge amount of prep to it because I still don't have the time to. So yeah, I'll do the prep I need to, but you know, I'm not going to go and do sort of more extravagant things like changing the gears for specific tracks. Anyway, that's an excuse at the end of the day. That's why we're rambling on for a little bit, because I was going to try to get out of that excuse. I was struggling through the low speed where James was actually really able to capitalise, and he was quick through there. So he did me a couple of times in those sections. I did try to get him around the outside of Coram, which nearly worked. I really enjoyed that. I was hoping I could pull it off, but I just wasn't quite brave enough to fully commit to that move. And, you know, I was frustrated with myself I didn't get that move there, because obviously that would have been a nice overtake, but it's one of those things, learning experience for myself. But one thing I've got to say is some really great, respectful racing between me and James. And to be fair, a lot of the times in the CMMCS this season, there's been that sort of respectful racing. Callum at Liddon Hill was another good example how close we got, never any contact. There were a few dodgy moments, we'll speak about that in a minute, but yeah, not with James, not with anyone I sort of normally race with. So yeah, that was good. Really enjoyed that first race, and eventually we got past, and then you saw Gideon would go off and he would get in between us. So I guess that kind of saved me a little bit, because I think James would have kept being able to keep attacking me by the end of that race. But I think Gideon getting in between and being maybe a bit more inconsistent helped me bridge a gap and sort of chase after Liam. So I caught up to Liam, and I saw he was closing in on his class leader. So as I was at that point in the class lead of my class, and we were starting to pull away from the cars behind, I decided not to attack Liam and sort of back off, which is something you should never really do in racing. You shouldn't back off, especially to the extent I did. I backed off a couple of seconds in the last few laps, which is a bit silly in hindsight. But I wanted to give Liam the gap to go and charge on and see whether he could get back his class lead, which he missed out on by a few tenths of a second. So I think if he didn't have the squabbling with Gideon back and forth, I think he would have been able to do it. But that's racing. And also Dominic Ryan drove a faultless race, so fair play to him. He deserved to win his class as well. So yeah, that's race 1 done. Really enjoyable one. And because we finished in that position, we would start the second race technically within class pole. I think we were a few positions higher up the grid. I think we started 24th for the first one, and I think we were about I'd say 19th, 20th for the next one. So that was quite good. Obviously a couple of cars didn't start and didn't finish the last race, and I guess that's the sort of maybe one of the bigger things I wanted to mention in this second race is that there are always quick cars starting at the back because they were tired from the first race, but there were some, I guess, quite aggressive sort of manoeuvres on the first few laps. I wasn't a big fan of the overtake. I got overtaken to turn 1 whilst there was a yellow flag. One of the fast guys overtook me. I don't know whether he just didn't see the yellow flag or just wanted to make his way through the pack as quickly as possible, but I don't know. I guess the stewards or whatever didn't see it because they never got a penalty for it, but I don't know. Overtaking under yellows in a scenario like that was a bit dodgy. So yeah, regardless, luckily we got through it all right, but you know what, I do sometimes think what could have happened there. Yeah, so moved on from that, started setting some more consistent lap times. I was doing all right actually. I think I noticed that there was quite a lot of wind in that second race in comparison to the first. I was losing a lot of time down the back straight as you go under the bridge, but then I was gaining a lot of time down the main straight, and I think, I can't really tell, but I think you kind of lose more time down the back straight because you're carrying more speed down it. But yeah, there was a big, I don't know what it was, headwind, tailwind. Yeah, it was a big headwind going down the back straight, and then a nice tailwind down the main straight. But I think I was just going slightly quicker, which we showed you in the video, which is cool. I liked that, liked having the opportunity to go a bit faster than I did in the first race. That was good. I think I'm rambling on a bit now, but we got past Dominic Ryan. We finished, I think, a few positions lower than that first race. Or was it about the same? Can't even remember, to be perfectly honest. It was around the same. Gideon overtook us, but then we overtook Dominic Ryan, and then I think there must have been a few retirements, but then a few fast cars came through. So I don't really know where we finished off the top of my head, but it was around the same sort of position. We had the same amount of cars behind us, I think, so would have been about the same. So to sum up the weekend, as I've said probably throughout this video, I was never really a massive fan of Snetterton. I still come out of this weekend saying it's not my favourite track. I don't really find a lot of the bits enjoyable in comparison to the other tracks we have in this country. But I guess that's kind of like we're blessed with some really good tracks in the UK. So yeah, it's maybe one of the not so good ones in a pretty good bunch of tracks. So maybe I should shut up and stop complaining. So regardless, of course, I'll do Snetterton in the future, and at least I have some sort of lap times to gauge myself on now. But one more event to go, I think, maybe 2. We'll see how it goes. Looking forward to them. They're probably going to be in the rain. That's going to be interesting. I haven't really driven the car much in the rain, so I look forward to seeing how I manage to do with that. But yeah, I've spoken for long enough. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it a lot, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.